The paper I'm going to present you today is about COVID-19 pandemic and internal migration, a comparative analysis, and is written together with two of my colleagues, Professor Cristian POPESCU and Associate Professor Mihai. The paper I'm going to present you today is about COVID-19 pandemic and internal migration, a comparative analysis, and it is written with my colleague, Professor Cristian POPESCU. Hello everyone, my name is DİACONU MAXİM and I'm professor of the Faculty of Economics and Business Administration from Alexandria University of Iași, Romania, and today I'm going to present you a paper written together with my colleague Professor Cristian POPESCU and entitled The COVID-19 Pandemic and Internal Migration, a Comparative Analysis. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected socio-economic and cultural environments around the world in unprecedented ways. Various measures were implemented by governments in order to limit the spread of the virus, such as social distancing, restrictions of international and national travel, and lockdowns. Consequently, the pandemic was associated with a historic decline in daily mobility and travel volume. However, despite all the literature emphasizing the negative consequences of pandemics, little research has yet been dedicated to the impact of the COVID-19 on internal migration. Previous work underlined only how the pandemic constrained international migration and increased internal migration from large cities to rural areas. It is known that internal migration supports the efficient functioning of the economy by bringing knowledge and skills to those areas where they are needed. Moreover, by enabling individuals to pursue their goals and aspirations, internal migration is widely regarded as an internal component of human development. Considering all these aspects, the present paper intends to analyze the extent of the change in the patterns of internal migration in several EU states during 2020 and 2021 by using the 2019 year as a benchmark. It is known that internal migration supports the efficient functioning of the economy by bringing knowledge and skills to those areas where they are needed. Moreover, by enabling individuals to pursue their goals and aspirations, internal migration is widely regarded as an internal component of human development. Considering all these aspects, the present paper intends to analyze the extent of the change in the patterns of internal migration in two EU states during 2020 by using the 2019 year as a benchmark. According to Piccoli et al., by the end of April 2020, 27 European countries had introduced limitations to internal mobility of the population, while the governments of Germany and Italy adopted territorial-specific measures at the lower territorial level. Early reports on the media speculated significant changes in the internal migration system. Reports about a rural revival emerged as a result of an exodus from large cities. Recent empirical evidence has confirmed an increase in internal migration from dense cities to rural areas, in Spain, for example, in Japan, United Kingdom, Sweden and Australia during 2020, and a decline on net migration rates in the largest German cities. Increases in real estate transactions outside cities were also linked to city residents moving to small towns or villages in France. In the United States, a rise of 30 percentage points in the number of households moving from large metropolitan areas was reported based on data from Mail. Australian Bureau of Statistics data indicate a net loss of 11,000 people from Australian capital cities in the September quarter of 2020. Various factors contributed to the urban exodus, with COVID-19 exposing key shortcomings of living in big cities. Facilitated by high air travel connectivity, job density and spatial concentration of public-facing jobs, big cities became early global epicenters of COVID-19 infections during the early phases of the pandemic. Pre-pandemic housing affordability and poor housing conditions have been consistent urban challenges in big cities. Coupled to these challenges, lockdowns, social distancing, remote work, and homeschooling have reportedly added greater pressure for families living in small and crowded living space to move out of cities in the look for more space and affordable housing. Business closures removed the effervescence of urban entertainment, leisure and social spaces, and triggered a rapid spike in unemployment in many countries during 2020 as non-essential public-facing work shut down. Considering all these aspects, our research hypothesis is that migration from the urban to rural areas have increased during the pandemic. In order to achieve our purpose, we use time series data of annual inter-country migration flows for the 2 EU states, Spain and Germany, offered by the National Institute of Statistics. We have chosen these 2 states because they are among the largest in EU according to the GDP. Germany is on the 1st position and Spain is on the 6th position, and they were also among the EU states most affected by the pandemic, considering the number of the COVID-19 cases. For example, Germany recorded so many cases so that it was placed on the 2nd position and Spain on the 7th position. So our results were focused on 2 analyzed countries, Spain and Germany. In the case of Spain, we noticed that the overall number of internal migrants dropped between March and May 2020 compared to the same period of 2019. Following the end of the lockdown in June, the number of internal migrants increased, exceeding the pandemic levels until November. In December, however, the values returned to pre-pandemic levels. Taken together, the number of moves decreased from 1.56 million to 1.52 million between the pre-pandemic 2016-2019 average and 2020. Although there was not a significant difference in the total number of movements, there are some big changes in the patterns of internal migration across the urban hierarchy, particularly in core cities and rural areas. Before the pandemic, a status of spatial equilibrium dominated the national internal migration system, with limited population redistribution, as in-migration flows were closely offset by out-migration movements. During the pandemic, in 2020, a pattern of population deconcentration emerged, reflecting net migration losses in high-density areas and net migration gains in more sparsely populous locations. Core cities recorded a population loss due to internal migration of 127,000 in 2020, and rural areas recorded an increase of population of 88,000 in 2020. Suburbanization is a dominant pattern in the national migration system in Spain. Net migration with suburbs was negative for all cities in the pre-pandemic period, and further reductions were recorded in 2020 due to the decay in the number of arrivals from suburbs to core cities. Additionally, it reveals that this pattern of population deconcentration is particularly related to movements from the large urban conglomerations such as Madrid and Barcelona to specific locations involving mountain rural areas and certain coastal towns. These areas are known to be popular holiday destinations and concentrate second home residences. In the case of Germany, with regard to the seasonal differences between 2019 and 2020, the total number of registered flows between federal states in the pre-lockdown months, January and February 2020, was similar to that observed in the early 2019. In March and April 2020, however, migration flows between federal states dropped by more than 25% in comparison to the previous year. In June 2020, the number of moves exceeded the previous year level, suggesting a catch-up of previously postponed registrations. In August-November period, the number of internal migrants was slightly higher or similar to those registered in 2019. Both the net migration losses for more densely populated counties and the net migration gains for less densely populated countries have become more pronounced. Consequently, the impact of internal migration on the redistribution of population between urban and rural areas has increased since the onset of the pandemic. Given that the pandemic might have a particularly strong impact on life course transitions that mainly take place at the young adult ages, such as students entering into post-secondary education, labor market entry, and early career development, we examined whether the drop in the intensity of migration differs by age. Indeed, it was noticed a decline in inter-county migration flows between 2019 and 2020, which differs strongly by age group. The drop is most pronounced for those aged between 18 and 24 years and those aged between 25 and 29 years. This finding suggests that the migration behavior of educational movers and labor market entrants was most heavily affected by the pandemic. Children below the age of 18 and those aged between 30 and 49 years old, as well as those aged 50 and over, also experienced declines in the absolute number of internal migration flows, but to a much lower degree. Considering all these aspects, we may say that our results allow us to draw two important conclusions. First of all, we notice a decline in the internal migration flows in the period February-August 2020 compared to the same period in 2019 in the two analyzed states. Secondly, our results suggest that the COVID pandemic had an impact on the redistribution of population between the urban and rural areas in the sense that negative internal migration rates were registered in the largest cities and positive rates in the rural areas. Therefore, our research hypothesis is confirmed. Thank you very much for your attention.